The morning air on the parade ground felt heavier than usual, as if something invisible pressed down on every cadet standing in formation. 200 young men and women stood shoulder to shoulder, boots locked in place, eyes straight ahead. No one spoke. No one moved. At the center of the open square stood Captain Elena Carter, alone, upright, her posture flawless despite the quiet storm unfolding around her. A steel table sat just a few steps away from her, and on it lay the symbols of her authority: rank insignia, commendation ribbons, and identification credentials, arranged neatly, almost ceremonially, as if preparing for a funeral rather than a disciplinary proceeding. The commandant, Colonel Richard Holbrook, paced slowly in front of the formation, his hands clasped behind his back. His voice carried easily across the ground when he finally spoke. "Captain Carter," he said, stopping directly in front of her, "you have demonstrated repeated failures to follow procedural command structure." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Effective immediately, your rank is revoked." A murmur rippled through the cadets before being crushed by a sharp order for silence. Elena didn't react. Her face remained calm, controlled, unreadable. Years of discipline had trained her body not to betray what her mind processed instantly. She knew this moment had been engineered. She knew it wasn't about procedure. Colonel Holbrook reached toward the table and lifted her insignia. "You're nothing now," he announced loudly, turning so every cadet could hear. "Let this be a lesson. No one is above the system." The words echoed, but Elena stood perfectly still. Inside her head, she cataloged details the way she always did: the wind direction, the spacing between guards, the tension in the colonel's jaw, the way several instructors avoided looking directly at her. Fear always left traces. Most people never noticed them. She did. As her insignia was removed, Elena's mind drifted briefly, not to regret, but to memory. Dark rooms with no windows. Missions discussed without names or maps. Decisions made where hesitation meant lives lost. She had been trained to operate where recognition didn't exist, where success was measured by disasters that never happened. The rank she wore here had always been temporary. A mask, a convenient fiction. Colonel Holbrook continued speaking, listing accusations that sounded official but felt hollow. "You failed to respect the chain of command. You acted independently. You made judgment calls beyond your authority." Beyond your authority. Elena almost smiled at that. She was ordered to step forward and surrender her credentials. She did so calmly, placing them on the table with precise alignment. The cadets watched closely, some with curiosity, some with quiet satisfaction, others with discomfort they didn't yet understand. Public humiliation was meant to be instructive. Holbrook leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You should have known your place." Elena met his eyes for the first time. Her gaze wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading. It was steady, analytical, and deeply unsettling. "I always do," she replied quietly. As she stepped back into position, the colonel turned again to the formation, continuing his lecture on discipline. But none of them noticed the black vehicle rolling slowly to a stop beyond the perimeter fence. Inside it, a man checked his watch, and somewhere far above this parade ground, decisions were already being reconsidered. The commandant was still speaking when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. No sirens, no shouting, but those trained to sense danger felt it immediately. A set of footsteps echoed across the concrete, steady and unhurried. Approaching from behind the command staff point, 3 individuals entered the parade ground without escort. They weren't in uniform. No insignia, no visible rank. But the way instructors stiffened told the cadets everything they needed to know. Authority doesn't always wear decorations. The man in front, Michael Hayes, carried a sealed folder under his arm. He stopped a few feet from Colonel Holbrook and spoke calmly. "This proceeding is suspended." Holbrook turned sharply. "You're out of line," he snapped. "Identify yourself." Michael didn't raise his voice. He simply handed over the folder. "Read." The colonel hesitated, then opened it. Color drained from his face as his eyes scanned the contents. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. A nearby officer leaned in to look, and immediately stepped back as if burned. "What is this?" Holbrook demanded. Though his confidence had vanished, Michael's tone remained professional. "Authorization. Clearance verification. Oversight confirmation." He turned slightly, his voice carrying now. Captain Elena Carter's assignment here was a cover role. Her operational authority does not originate from this command structure. A stunned silence swallowed the parade ground. Michael faced Elena and nodded once. "Commander Carter," he said clearly, "your presence is required elsewhere." The word commander hit the formation like a shockwave. Cadets exchanged looks, trying to process what they had just heard. Instructors stood frozen. The colonel's hands trembled. Elena stepped forward slowly. The humiliation from moments earlier seemed distant now, almost irrelevant. She didn't look victorious. She looked resolved. "Multiple operations under her direction," Michael continued, "prevented incidents that will never be recorded publicly. Her actions were reviewed, approved, and protected." Holbrook tried to speak. No words came out. Elena glanced once at the table where her insignia lay. She didn't pick it up. "That rank was never the point," she said quietly. Then she turned to the cadets. "What you saw today," she said, "wasn't leadership. It was insecurity disguised as authority. Learn the difference." With that, she walked away with Michael Hayes, leaving behind 200 cadets who would never forget the day they learned how power really works. The aftermath rippled outward long after Elena Carter disappeared beyond the gate. Official explanations were vague. Records were adjusted. Names were removed from reports. But among the cadets, the story took on a life of its own. They spoke quietly that night in barracks and hallways. About composure under pressure. About humiliation endured without bitterness. About the realization that the loudest authority in the room isn't always the strongest. Colonel Holbrook was reassigned within weeks. No ceremony. No announcement. Just absence. Some cadets would later say that day changed how they understood power. That real strength didn't need applause. That justice didn't arrive on schedule, but it arrived when it mattered. As for Elena, she returned to the shadows she had always known. New missions, new identities, no public acknowledgement, just responsibility. Because some leaders aren't meant to be seen, they're meant to make sure others survive. And that is why stories like this exist. If you believe in accountability, resilience, and unseen courage, subscribe to Grow for Justice. Because justice doesn't grow in silence. It grows when stories are told.